throughout the value chains, and for us, for consumers, to speak up our standards on sustainability. I think the situation is not that bad. There are signs that consumers are increasingly aware of their overconsumption. It gives hopes that in many countries, also in Finland, I hope also here in Sweden, especially the many young people are very, very active. They are also making the questions to parents and grandparents that have you noticed? And yes, we have. And we have also the ways how we can combat overconsumption and overproduction. And one of them is recycling. For example, UNEP has estimated that the material value loss from non-recycled fibers globally is more than $100 billion. Circular economy has huge potential creating new economic opportunities, and what I always underline, decent jobs while supporting environmental and climate objectives. So, dear friends, it is really time to take concrete actions towards a sustainable future. Everybody has to play. We have also our own role. There will be also thirsty with governments, international organizations, cities, academia, private sector. You have the journalists. I mentioned that many young people are forerunners in sustainability. Not everyone, but quite many. And so you can encourage your fellow sisters that the gender equality work is really important. It's effective and powerful environmental weapon. And I think that we need to make sure that women have a strong voice in the decision making. I hope that all men will now know it. Yeah, because the modern man is also the very good example that we need the both genders. And I do trust, dear brothers, in you. And we do that together. So I do hope so that we are encouraging each other because we know all the targets, we know the goals, we know a lot of good deeds to do that. So we have already quite enough food for our thoughts. But what we need is our hearts, because there is no change if our heart is with a partner in this journey with us. So I have a feeling when I see your face that your hearts are here, and you will also bring the others to come with us. We are powerful together, and that's why I think so. We will do it. Right, thanks.
Thank you for those remarks. And I feel like you wanted to say something there. We all have a job to do. We all have a role to play. And I just really want to appreciate the State Secretary for the Environment, Mr. Grönvall, for your presence here, for your strong involvement to activism. Thank you so much. We bid you farewell. we stay here with you, President.
Okay, I'm getting.
You are getting
I'm
ready.
not even I checked. Okay.
And we have a panel of rock stars here that will, as a matter of fact, continue to inspire our discussions today. I will not have the privilege of introducing this because I am actually leaving the podium and handing the microphone to another great leader, co-conspirator of ours, Ms. Helena Leurent. She is the head and director of Consumers International, and she will introduce their panel members that will continue talking with President Halonen on some of these important issues. Helena, over to you.
Thank you, Jorge. It's wonderful to be here. I think Jorge was just ready to go and get coffee for himself. That's why he's delegating. But it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here today. Let me introduce the panel to the floor. First, of course, we have Madam President Halonen. I also, in looking at your
No, this is matter of fact. It was the vice president Mauno Koivisto. His wife said always to his husband that you really trust in women. And then the President Koivisto said that yeah, do I trust. So give them the hardest jobs because they can do it.
Okay, and here we are. Thank you. So may I also introduce to the stage Mr. Rolph Payet. Welcome. Thank you so much. Rolph is wherever you like. Rolph is the executive secretary for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, of course. And Teixeira, a warm welcome to you. Well, thank you for joining us. Ms. Kehkashan Basu. Warm welcome, thank you for joining us. And Mr. Jian is on the screen. Hello, sir. Welcome. Where are you hailing from today? Where are you joining us?
Hello,
today,
greetings,
sir?
greetings from Nairobi.
Oh, and you're on mute.
Hi, I'm in Nairobi.
You're still on mute.
Oh,
This is the phrase of 2022.
can you hear me now?
Welcome back. There we are. So, where are you joining us from today?
Thank you.
It's not going to work for us. We're going to make this work by the end of the session. And then we have a representative from the Ingka group. Welcome, warm welcome. Thank you for joining us, please. Okay, so in this session, we're going to get to questions from the audience. So please do ready your comments and questions. We're going to do two opportunities for us to hear from our panelists first, though. One, really exploring almost your theory of change, I think. This session is called Thinking, Acting, and Inspiring Differently Around Sustainable Consumption and Production. And each of you will share a little bit about how you see changing, acting, thinking, and inspiring differently. And then we'll get into a little bit more substance and content about sustainable consumption and production itself. And then we'll come to the audience for your questions. Okay, so ready for those at home as well. Can I come to you first, Kehkashan? Now, at age 12, Rio plus 20, I think you were the youngest person who was in a press conference at that point. You've gone on to build an organization with 3,000 members around the world. You've written a book. I think you're a perfect person to come to first. How do we think differently about a world where sustainable consumption and production is a reality?
Thank you for the question. I'll just start by saying it's so wonderful to be here today to share this space with all of you in person. And our planetary resources are, even today with our global population about to touch 8 billion, they are enough to comfortably meet our needs, but not our greed. And therein lies the problem, since the early days of the Industrial Revolution, it has been drilled into our psyche that every single physical item of creation on Earth is only there to serve not our needs, but our wants. And that is what has allowed so many developed nations to still mock climate change as a myth. It has allowed government subsidies to still spend billions on extracting and mining fossil fuels. It has made wastage a normal, and that means that there are millions elsewhere, particularly from the global south, who are suffering from those consequences. So I kind of live by 3 keywords that are self-awareness, accountability, and procrastination that I believe would really help us to change the way we think about sustainable consumption and production. So firstly, self-awareness is absolutely key to bringing about a change in perspective, because really it's not someone else's problem to solve, and each individual must take action, must consume with care, and making those right decisions can only come with an increase in self-awareness. Secondly, accountability. I mean, there is clearly a lack of accountability with regard to policies and implementation of sustainable consumption and production. So once there is demonstrated accountability, we will be able to kind of shine a spotlight on sustainable consumption and production, which will then force people to think more about it and view it with the importance it deserves. And then lastly, procrastination is really this disease that is plaguing the adoption and implementation of sustainable consumption and production. And we really need to avoid that. We need actions. We need to have measures in place that dilute procrastination so that we are able to change the way we think about sustainable consumption and production and make sure that we are actually able to adopt it in all facets of life. So that links us back to the other 2 keywords as well. So once we stop procrastinating, once we address the lack of accountability, and once we are self-aware, no matter which stakeholder groups we identify with, then and only then will we be able to change the way we think about sustainable consumption and production and actually consume with care.
Thank you. And you are currently the founder, or you were the founder, you're now the president of the Green Coke Foundation. How do you bring those 3 words just very briefly into what you do now?
Oh, absolutely. Our ethos is consuming with care, and we work with young people, women, marginalized communities, and people in urban environments all across the world to really create this change in their own zones of influence and inspire others every single day to ensure that we as responsible global citizens are able to take care of our planet and give back, because at the end of the day, it is our planet, is our responsibility as responsible citizens to make sure that we don't leave behind a dead planet for our future generations. That's said in Rio that you soon see polar bears under palm trees, and that's something that is very close to becoming a reality. That's something that we are actively trying to prevent through localized parental actions.
Thank you so much. And I love the fact that we start with people in this discussion, which can sometimes be quite technical, and start with sectors. Let's start with people and planet at the heart of it. Can I come to you, Mr. Liu? Let's test the sound again. You are director at the science division at UNEP, but your first role at United Nations was as a deputy lead in the IPCC. So, and that was, I think, in 2008, if I have that right. So I would love to ask you, how do we think differently about sustainable consumption and production? What's the model in your head for how we get there and what that looks like?
Well, thank you very much.
We are still exploring the sound.
Can you hear me now?
Let's see, is that on our side? It's on our side, Mr. Liu. I apologize. We will let you know when.
No, maybe you let. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear.
It is, isn't it just? Digitalization is with us. If not, give me a sign.
No, it's
Oh, okay, no, but I apologize, Mr. You were still sorting out sound this side.
Jaha,
But
det är
we
ju
can
alldeles
see you
nyss ju på den här.
beautifully, and I promise we will come back to you. With that, former Minister of the Environment in Brazil, I'm coming to you next. Yes. And this, I mean, it was wonderful seeing 2012, I think you drove change in your country in Brazil so that there was the lowest historical deforestation levels. 3 years later, you went to drive and led the delegation, excuse me, for your country at the Paris Agreement. I'm coming to you next to talk about ACT. How do we act, in your view, to drive sustainable consumption and production?
Share new ideas and new perspectives. Really, because what's happening in Brazil today is very disruptive about setbacks and what we need to avoid, not the future of today. And it's very important to observe that we're not only discussing changing our think and inspire, discuss how we live. And this is the critical issue because the planetary crisis is saying to us that it's not only the global crisis. This is a new dimension, political dimension that we don't understand yet. It's true. And to my perspective, I think that it's very important to observe the politics of transition to enter question. Okay, we are changing. And unfortunately, we don't know all the dimensions how we change today and how we can manage this, but we can deal with the impacts. And what is happening today is very critical, not only because of the developed world, but also because of the developing world. And that's why I mentioned politics of transition. But in the world, it's really critical.
Samma signal som vi hade förut.
We
Det är samma
should
försök
understand
förut.
how we can manage phasing out and phasing down perspectives.
Det är inte ändra
Because we're
någonting.
changing. And this is what's happened in Glasgow last year. We need to face politically the phasing down versus phasing out considering energy needs. And before the war that we have today. So my feeling is that short-term and mid-term perspective, we need to address equity. And not equity as an open concept. We need to understand how we can act today, not only to impact the short-term perspective, but also and equity is a really important concept to address this sector, not based on the old values, but the new values, because we need to grow with nature. And this is something very, very interesting, because this means that we need to bring
Det är någon.
So I have to have the choice to make sure that Brazilians should choose better, because you like barbecue, football, and beer, and this is our culture. The second word from very fast here is partnership, and you need to be qualified partnership. Okay, it's not a word.
Det är samma, det hade ju
As I mentioned here before, we need to understand the global south, and not only the conversation as a whole, but also the role of developing emerging economies to play as leaders in this transition. And we cannot forget that the emerging economies, they really play a strategic role, because we have population there and markets, and also food demands, energy demands, etc. So consumers in the West, the consumer behavior in the West is different in the East, in the North, and the same in the South. We need to understand this better. And it's not, and I do believe that women have a really important role when we go to this question, because my feeling, I agree with the president, women really say the role. It's so fantastic. And we can change better the world. I'm convinced of this. And the third word is, it's important to highlight here, it's immediately. What immediately means? It's not only to act in short-term results, it's to understand really something easy and clear for people to know how we can act. And this means not talk about carbon, because nobody knows what carbon is. Can you see carbon? Biodiversity, you can see nature, but you can't see natural resource. You can touch it. And you can understand if you can buy something, or you can produce something based on assets, that make sense, that you can change to be better and to be in the future. So my feeling is that we need to connect science with the political world, but also traditional knowledge. It's very important. And to understand better about your national realities. If not, it's easier to say that we need to change, but you cannot explain how to change and how people should be.
to action gap. And that is something that all consumer advocates around the world look for, in fact. So multiple ways, we move from think to act. I'm going to check whether we can move back to, no, right, Mr. Liu, I apologize, we're still working out how to come back to you. So we're still going to go forward, which is the name of the game, into acting. And this, Rolph, I would like you to answer that question about, right, in a period of intense change, we started with people. How would you see how we act? And you were sort of the lead author of the IPCC reports for the third and fourth assessments. You've seen sort of, you've perhaps seen our reaction to some of the news coming out each time. So how would you make us act faster on the information that we've been given over time?
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting question then. And of course, on acting, it depends on what is pushing you to act. And this is where I come to some fundamental challenges that we have and that we need to change before we can go to acting. If I'm bombarded every night with an advert to buy a car instead of a bicycle, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy a car. And that's the fundamental problem. So the whole structure of everything is because we buy, because we have become very good at making people choose what they don't want to choose. Because our structure of our markets, and this is why I call it serious market failure, is if I'm going to buy this nice lady here with something every evening, she's going to go to the shop the next day and get what I've been spending millions. We spend millions on marketing for the wrong things than trying to fix the planet. So for me, that's the first fundamental problem. When we have three problems, and I'll get to your mind three key ones. The first one, and just to brief everyone, I come from a very small group of associations. So I see that all the time. We have one big island, we have one small island. I went to the small island during my political days, and they told me, Rolph, we've seen the people on the big islands have these big cars. And on this island, there were no cars at all. And we had pride in this island. It was cultural, grassroots. They consumed ecologically, they didn't use any pesticides. For me, that was heaven on earth. But they looked at the guys on the main island and said, I need cars, I need everything that you have. And this is what we've done to the world. You know, some parts of the world they use bicycles. I won't mention the countries. But if you look at a photograph of 20 years ago, the cities were full of bicycles. Today, they are choked up in pollution. They are full of cars. And the other countries that had cars are now trying to create bicycle lanes and bus lanes and whatnot. This is the conundrum we are in today. And I think we need to fix this fundamental problem of exactly how do we move forward. What are the real solutions that we need, and what are those real solutions? The distortions that we have today, the kind of open economies, I think, I'm not saying close them. What I'm trying to say is this for me is a serious fundamental flaw in how we interpret things. So I have two cars, you want two cars. This, everybody travels, everybody's on holiday, everybody wants the same thing. But when we add up all the footprints of everybody wanting to travel, it doesn't make sense anymore. So why should I travel and you don't travel? Why should you? I have a car and you have. So we all have to decide that. And somebody's been talking about what we need and what we want and what great. I mean, we are all part of this. Sorry to say so. Let's look at ourselves and say, what do I want? How much do I want? Because whatever I want, I have to answer the same for the 8 billion people that are sitting on this planet. They need to have the same thing that I want. Otherwise, it's not fair. Otherwise, we cannot talk about fairness and equity. If we want something and we deny the person next to us, it's the same thing that we want. I think this is probably fundamental. The second point, sorry.
But I just want to check, I mean,
yeah.
Many people are going in.
The temporary problem we're going through now, when we've seen in COVID, and there was a report that came out, the richest people in the world got actually 20% or 50% richer, and the poorer got even poorer. So this is a fundamental problem that we cannot address even with the shorter cost of increase of cost of living. So for me, that's only a little perturbation in the whole thing. We have to address this bottom. I know I'm being a bit utopian here, but I think we need to put the finger on where the problem is. Second point is if we look at the climate change issue, we have become a culture that depends exclusively on fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels, I would say very frankly, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that everything runs on fossil fuel. We become totally dependent on fossil fuels. We become totally dependent on beef. We become totally dependent on wheat. And the list goes on. There's about 10 to 20 commodities on the planet where we force everybody to eat. I mean, I come from a region of Africa. Is wheat for Africa? No, there's cassava. There's hundreds of other carbohydrates that can be grown locally there. But what have we done? We've destroyed those markets there so that we can come in and replace the traditional foods. We see, again, I come back to what we are seeing on TV, what is pushed through trade. So these are fundamentals that need to be addressed. I grew up. I mean, this is simple examples, and even I personally experienced. Let's look at coconut oil, sunflower oil, and palm oil. This is the other one. Now the rest of the world is pushed for palm oil. So there's been a lot of investment at the cost of biodiversity for palm oil. But we also had in Europe sunflower oil. Coconut oil was very popular in the 60s, and it went down. So our total dependence on one or singular commodities that we try to sell to the whole world is also a fundamental flaw. And now there is, of course, call to consume locally, and I think that's the way originally we were. But then we started global trade. I'm not saying that global trade is wrong here. So that's the second point. The third point, which also is fundamental, is let's take the humble electric car today. It was invented many years ago. But what we in Europe want is we want an electric car that can take us 500 miles across the continent and one that can accelerate from 0 to 60 kilometers an hour. Now, an African guy is not looking for that kind of car. He's looking for a car that can carry his vegetables from point A to point B. But in R&D terms and in industrial terms, we don't think that way. We want to spend time developing this high-powered car because where the markets are, we want to sell this car will get us the most revenue. So for me, I could have revolutionized the transport in Africa with just a motor, battery, and 4 wheels, because it's what electric car is, right? And it needs to travel all the way to be. But we haven't done that. We are waiting for a super fast car, a super high-tech car with all the bits and pieces. We produce it in Europe, we sell it in Europe, and then the surplus of this we send to Africa. Now Africa, you can have an electric car. So we have to get disruptive technology that can transform our societies very quickly, especially those that emerging economies who are claiming, and rightly so, you guys have had a chance to end it, now we want to end it. So that is a fair one. But we are missing the whole point of having these disruptive technologies coming. Same thing with mobile technologies. We spend a lot of time putting cables all over the place. Now you can have mobile. And for an African person, a mobile is such an important investment for creating the economy. So we don't need to start building, but we're still in this model of one generator and then building pipelines and whatever. I made this point because I think it addresses the issue from a very fundamental way, how we deal with production and consumption. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but from my side, I'm responsible for free chemicals conventions. And what is important from our side is, of course, looking at how, because the more we consume, then the more waste we end up with. So food waste has been a big issue throughout the world, and we have people who don't have access to food, but then we have tons and tons of food which is wasted. So what are we doing? What are we individually doing to reduce food waste? Both in our homes, both in our communities. I mean, if we all seriously took food waste seriously, I think we will really, really start addressing the problem of sustainable consumption. Electronic materials waste, which is a big issue around the world. Electronic waste is a big challenge for my convention. How many of us have a mobiles more than 3-4 years? How many of us have computers more than 3-4 years? How many of us with electric materials? How many do we buy when the next model comes out? You see what I'm trying to say? So yes, I know Apple and the other company will complain we're not buying enough. Don't worry, the population is growing. We're gonna get more millions, so you can sell more. But what I'm trying to say is, how much are we disposing of? I'll stop here, but I've just hopefully given you a perspective from my side of the table of where we are going and how we should be trying to address this in a very active, proactive fashion.
Perfect, thank you. So if I try Ingka, I know Jesper was trying to be here, but thank you for joining us in the role of CEO for today. You had possibly something that's even more important, which is the circular and sustainability plans, I think. I'd love to understand, so this is where we're trying to go to inspire. And I think you actually have in your corporate plans to inspire 1 billion consumers, am I right? So how do we do that? Building their word cloud as we think about this sort of initial part of the plan. Please, to you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll definitely say just the 3 words, so thank you for having me here. And I'll build on this President's point said earlier about how sometimes the women take the hardest jobs finding out at 10 p.m. the night before to step in for the CEO. And you would have obviously loved to have been here. The role of business is really key because, of course, the irony for many is that a company like IKEA that can be seen by many to be driving consumption is also there to really support the mainstream sustainable and healthy living. And I think we are fortunate, you could say, in the sense that we have a purpose that is really driving us as our North Star. And if you really look at the role of businesses need to question what is their purpose, who are they serving? And from an IKEA perspective, we have a strong vision, which is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And that is very much funded, fundamentally coming back to how do we work for the many? How do we understand the people that we serve? And it's been mentioned here many times that we work across many markets, not just the global north, where people are fortunate and have access to funds where they can really afford a relatively high-end lifestyle. But actually, how do we bring that to others? And again, business needs to really question fundamentally. And we look at this every day of how do we think long term? How do we serve the many? And how do we understand the needs of our customers? So purpose is my first word there. And secondly, I think, again, IKEA, but also private sector needs to come back to, are we really here for profit? Are we here for value creation? Values and value creation is not quite one word, but that's certainly my second point. We look at how we create value and how we integrate value creation and how we measure value creation across the business. We are 100% interdependent with the resources across the world, with the people that we serve, the people that work for us, people in our supply chain, our communities. So we need to understand how we value those resources and how we stay on top of not just profit, but also how we bring that in the short term, long term. So businesses and private sector needs to question, what is your purpose and how do you create value, true value, not just in the short term or profits for the few. And the third point, and this is really key for us, is affordability, not just because of a recent cost of living crisis, but affordable and sustainable living has to be key. How do we bring everyone along with us and how do we mainstream better living? Which also comes back to the incentives the business needs to be enabled by to make sure that we can, in fact, make affordable products and solutions and services for everyone. And how do we make it inspiring and talk the language of people in a way that's relevant to them? We can sit in forums like this and many others where sometimes the language is quite difficult to engage with. We need to have empathy with the reality of people in their lives. We've done lots of research around, say, trying to inspire to live a healthy and sustainable life. That might not be the motivation of many of our customers. It might, in fact, just to be able to make ends meet. So let's meet them where they are
and let's make sure we understand their needs and how we can serve that. So I think the final word for me is on affordability, and then I'll sneak in a fourth, which is accessibility. Just to make sure that, again, we have to bring everyone with us. I'll end on a quote actually from Ingka, which was that before he died, when Jesper Brody, our CEO, took over, or just before he took over rather, there was a question to say, please make sure you really think long term. And the question was, well, how is long term? In at least 200 years. So we can't just stop as private sector and give profits to the few and to allow flow of capital to go where there's a quick return, and how do we really change that around?
Thank you so much. And with that, President, can I come to you? You were president of your country for 12 years, re-elected. So you probably have some really interesting thoughts about how you inspire people to change towards sustainable consumption and production. What are the 3 words you would add to our word cloud for 2022 and the next 50 years?
Be brave and be true. Be true, honest, and then let's enjoy the life. And that's why I always say it's also concerning, for instance, the food production. Food production is now, as I explained already, it's a very big issue, and it's one of the main reasons for the land degradation. People don't burn the rainforest because they are bad. They feel to have harms, but then we should tell also how to do it so that they get what they want. They want to get food, okay, and then we have to tell also that how we can reuse the land which has been earlier degraded. And then part of that they cannot do by themselves, but we can also to be partners in that how we can make such kind of the diet which is healthy, which is also sustainable, and I always add it, tasty, delicious, so that, I mean, that it's not just that we survive, but it's a question that we have a certain issue, we enjoy the life, and it's not forbidden. But we have to do it in a fair way, and that's how I inspire. And the Nordic welfare system, what you are now in Sweden, it's a much better start than many other countries, because we have used to live here so that we say already that, yeah, we cannot do this education system for you, but for children or for your grandchildren. So we are used to that, because the nature here is pretty hard. Now you are in the best time here, but if you are the nine months with the nose and snow and ice and not so smiling people, so it's different. The Swedes are smiling more than we Finns, but anyway. So I mean that sometimes you can get it also in a way that that's the life, but still we enjoy it. And then they find the ways how also your fellow citizen can do that. And it has been easier for me to be a president in Finland, because we have been the poorest of the Nordic sisters, 5 Nordic countries. And so we have all this competition, sisterly competition. If the Swedes can do that, if the Norwegians can do it, even Icelandic can do that, Danish, why not we? And so we have used this also in global sense, that when we find somebody who is crazy and brave enough to try, so the others will come also. And I think that this is a good neighborhood envy. And so that's the way how I want to tell that we have succeeded to do this. You can succeed to do that, because you are not less smart. You can do that. And so I think that, for instance, in Brasilia, you have the indigenous people, and they tell how to live. Also, so that you are in the harmony with the nature. Some things we can do better now, but not all. We should listen to them also. We have the indigenous people in the north here. We have the Sami people who have also survived from the ice and snow and be very creative. So that's the way. So I would say it's inspiring that there are challenges. This is an adventure, but this is an adventure which can save the planet. So people feel the solidarity with each other if we find it the right way. The younger generation will say to us, to the older ones, that you have done this, you have spoiled our world. And then we tell them, yeah, and it should be done better. And they are very good when it's coming for the food consumption. They are pretty good also, how could I say, many other issues, what we have not done. They understand these values. But if I tell to them that, well, it's not fitting for you because you have no genes. But if I tell that you are wearing quite new jeans, do you know that it's 10,000 per bottle you need for the new jeans? That be proud that you have the old ones and don't make them old when you buy them. You wear them until they are old and worn out. And I think that these are the good ideas. And I work there, as I said, for UNCCD, which is already speaking for the countries of the South. And Ricky Kane, I have adopted him just recently as a grandson. He's already over 40. My husband said when he saw his picture, he said, it's not, our new grandson doesn't look like newly born. He's a very good pop star. And he tells always that when he is in different places, he always says that, yeah, you have seen this jacket earlier. I will wear it until it's worn out. It's good quality, I like it, I will wear it. I mean that it's also such kind of the overconsumption, what people do, that we should consider them to be good ones, or how could I say, the important ones. But if we tell them it's not the way, and then we try to inspire them in a way that new habits can be also such kind that it can be a fashion. Even I hate the word fashion, that we can use these ways what you are doing and in marketing. But finally, I will say only that I love to be with these people here because in 2012, I was in Rio Summit introducing our Agenda 2030. And so I remember when they were the young ones and say, oh, we do that. And here they are. So thank you.
Thank you. So on one hand, we could see sustainable consumption and production as changing our economic model, thinking about behavior change and how we act as consumers around the world, disruptive technologies, ways of creating circular business models for waste, or I think far more beautifully, we can think it's an adventure to save the planet. And I think we could use that quite beautifully to keep us inspired. I'm going to break with the session structure because I think we've got such experts in the room. I just want to check and see if there are any questions right now. I'd like to see people's hands go up quickly and I'll pick like 3 or 4. Please keep your question brief. Okay, real question, not a like manifesto, please. Lady here, pink jacket, one at the back and one here. So please, mic coming.
This is for Dr. Teixeira. Or anyone else who wants to offer. You talked about the politics of transition. Yeah. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the mechanisms of effectively phasing down or phasing out ideas that we need to get towards SEP. What works, what doesn't, what timescales are we talking about, and how can we think about fighting this against political changes that may seek to undo or undermine some of that work?
Great question, thank you. Absolutely, go for it.
Hi.
It's on, keep
No,
talking.
No, I can speak.
Yeah.
Hi, Vanessa Timmer. I'm Executive Director of One Earth, working on sustainable lifestyles. Hege, I wanted to ask you a question. Just figuring out what's happening on the panel. We're talking, yes, as Helena was saying, about consumers, but I think there's power when we move our lens from consumption to living and daily life, because then we expand it beyond the consumer culture, as Jian was mentioning, and really think about how this is about sustainable living, everyday living. And the reason I ask that is because when we think of people not just as consumers, but in terms of their whole life, there's great strategies that can emerge, like, for example, supporting people in life transition moments, like when their lives are changing, retiring, having a baby, et cetera. And so I just wondered if that's something like that has happened within IKEA, where you started to look beyond the consumer to think about how lives are changing, work is changing, leisure is changing, our gender roles are changing, and how that might inform how we could mainstream sustainable living. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have something to say on that as well. Don't forget your consumer rights, though, and consumer policy that supports you throughout. That needs to be stronger. Your question?
Yeah, I will continue on business side as well. I represent the UN Global Compact Network in Georgia. So we mobilize business for the better world. And of course, business plays very important role in responsible consumption and production. And value creation is great. But at the same time, when you talk with the SMEs and in countries such as Georgia, value creation is not a business case for them. So how do we incentivize business to be more responsible in the consumption and production? Well, on the consumption side, of course, the consumer as well, but business can motivate the consumer to be more responsible as well on the other hand. So what do we talk with them?
Great point. And gentleman at the back.
Good afternoon, Izabella. Just a few words of who I am. I'm the former chief of SCP from where the international standard and the generation emerged. I say this so you can understand my level of frustration and pessimism, and that's my question. The elephant in the room are African nations. They are not here. The middle class of the consumers will be from there. Yeah. If our planet will sink, it will be with them, not because of them. And so my question is, Mrs. Teixeira and Mrs. President, what would you say to the Asian and African people when we talk about sustainability, when we put it in terms of the global or not global?
Very good. Okay, excellent questions. Does anybody have a burning question they wish to share before we go back to the panel? This is great. Okay, perfect. So I just want to reflect, Mr. Liu, unfortunately, although digital is crucial for our future and we need it for traceability, transparency, connection, the whole thing, it's not working right now. So I believe we are going to have an address at the very end that Mr. Liu is kind enough to provide for us. And I think it's really important that we're able to hear from him. I was personally hoping to do that, so I apologize. But thrilled that we have all of the rest of the panel here in the room together. So let's dig into, having heard the ways in which you would like to change, the things that are top of mind, burning for you in your theory of change. Let's dig into the content. And I would love, and we've heard questions which are, all right, phasing out, phasing down, how does that work in practice, and how do we fireproof that, was a great word, against political transition. We heard questions about SMEs, business approaches. I think scope 3 would be fantastic to hear about there as well. The way in which we address and support and protect, I think more than anything, and perhaps there are, speaking for consumer advocates around the world, empower consumers in Africa and Asia. So let's start a little bit here. I would love to come first. Let's come back to you at IKEA. I would love to hear your thinking about the way in which you are sort of driving change in business. We do hear that businesses are not moving as fast as they should, or perhaps there are far too many cases of greenwashing. How do you think about both taking a stand and a step forward and bringing your value chain with you, creating the incentives for yourself, for your employees, and for others that actually make this real?
Right.
Thank you for that question. And I hope I also speak maybe to some of the question about better living as well in that context. So I would say it's a given maybe in this context, but we believe in the crisis and we believe in science, and we want to be around as a business for a long time. So actually, when you start to model that, both from a material availability, impact on the business resilience, the business case is really clear. So we don't have to waste time on the why, or should we, right? So the focus is very much, and that really frees up energy and action in the business and to how do we do this and how do we take that action. So we've committed to be climate positive and circular by 2030. That means that we are committed to becoming net zero by 2050 and aligned with Paris, but also how we will then start to really decouple our growth from material use, which sounds easy when you say it, but it's absolutely not. And that includes the fact that we have the aim to only use renewable and recycled materials at all our products. That's over 12,000 products at this point in time. And also how we drive new business models and opportunities for both knowledge and value creation and different types of consumption with consumers. But it starts with, back to our vision, creating a better everyday life for the many people. There is no better life on a dead planet. There is no work for people on a dead planet. So coming back to the circular and the climate positive commitments that we've made. And then it's really about starting to break that down into looking at the totality, not just with carbon, not just between, with consumption. So it's a big topic that also brings in, how do we become regenerative? How do we invest in biodiversity? How do we tackle pollution? How do we understand and link that back to our consumer needs and the products and services that we provide, which will then, in fact, drive, hopefully, profitability for the company in the long term, because we are, in fact, addressing real needs. And I think it comes back again to not selling products, to say we actually talk about, as an example, selling good quality sleep. And of course, there is generally a bed and a mattress involved in that, but it's also involved in understanding the quality of the air, the pollution levels, what do people need, and actually taking a needs-based approach and design our products from that perspective. But again, we have to be fully responsible for the long-term effects on the products and the materials we put on the market. We look at obviously how we consume as a business, the materials we put into our products, but also we have a unique opportunity as brands to really work with customers, citizens. We don't necessarily use the term, to your point of that, we don't necessarily use citizens as an internal term at the moment. But of course, we have to collaborate on how we create systems change and how we bring our supply chain with us and our value chain with us. So I would say that we're in a process where we are exploring and asking ourselves some difficult questions around how do we drive behavior? How do we work with customers around positive behavior change? Do we measure that? Again, laddering up to what it means for people to change their life for better. And how do we start to take action? For example, we provide spare parts, so supporting people to look after the products in the long term. We're starting to implement what we call circular hubs in all our stores. People can sell back furniture to IKEA. And all of these things in isolation might sound quite modest and everyday, but it's actually in the everyday things will change, making it normal, making it affordable, easy and accessible. Now, we also see from our research, so there is an intention and action gap. So how do we, yes, we can bring all of this to market, but then how do we also work together as an ecosystem of value creators and also business, consumer citizens to start to address maybe what you're talking about around the values change of what a good life looks like. What does success looks like? We've been brought up on a narrative of study hard, work hard, make money, buy your house, get your car, and your life is successful. How do we change that narrative? That's certainly not for IKEA to solve on our own. So there is a role to be played around how we redefine good life and what the role of IKEA, but as a business and ecosystem is in that.
Can you talk a little bit about scope 3 and working with suppliers and how you see, so how do you take almost become a first mover in this space and drive change faster than it otherwise would?
So we have ambitious plans and practices around responsible sourcing and how we work with SMEs, social enterprises, particularly for how we develop our range and where we source our materials. But I think there's also the opportunity to work, of course, with particularly on the downstream post-consumer waste, but food, the longevity of prolonging the life of products. And this again is something you can't do at global level. It has to be localized. So we're looking right now, multiple solutions across different markets to understand the local ecosystem that we are dependent on to support customers, to support people, to look after products in the long term, to care and repair, but also making sure that things don't go to landfill or incineration. So again, we can have company policies on our procurements, how we really work and obviously measure our impact overall, but how we collaborate. And this is ongoing work. There's incentives that are completely inconsistent, as we know, across markets. So in one market, we might have a model that is super effective, whilst we can't scale it because incentives are not there. So this is again where we need to see harmonized standards, incentives, and really ensure that capital will flow in the right direction. And therefore, that's something government needs to support and set up.
Thank you. Minister President, can I come to each of you to talk about a couple of the points that came up? One was phase out. Very well. Okay, excuse me, please.
Okay, so politicians come now to the forum because, for instance, this standardized 9P, for instance. Now the European Union drives it that whatever is on mobile telephone, you can just put it in and you don't need for different places a different type. Then the consumers normally want to buy every second year something new. I mean that they think that the washing machines or refrigerators or freezers or whatever, that they should last a little bit longer time. So if you ask it from the consumers how to do it, so they would love to get them more lasting pieces. They would love that the cars would be repaired in the local place, and not so that you always order something from the big companies. But the question is that whether politicians could do also such kind of the regulations which push the business side to do such kind of things. When we were young, it was quite possible we could repair more things than what we can do today. And so there are many other such kind of issues what we can do. And then one thing for the consumers. So WWF, for instance, has done in Finland that they have traffic lights for the fishes which are good to eat or not to eat, that those who never should be eaten because they are such kind of species. And so I mean that you can do it very easily. So trusting consumers also. They do it if it's not too complicated that they need a data and compass that is it today the workers' right, or is it now the nature, or is it something else today? I mean that make it easier so that you can also fulfill the demands of your consumers.
Thank you. I think one of the interesting things is seeing how many labels are out there right now. We're almost at that point where we used to have so many different health labels, and now we've moved to simplifying that so it's clear what to choose. Do we need something similar to that for sustainability or a whole range of different aspects that consumers are increasingly looking for altogether? How would, in your view, how would we sort of kickstart that and really push for harmonization much faster? Because typically that can take a long, long time. What would you do differently?
I'm very optimistic because the EU is now making some new steps forward, but I think that it's for us also, for the voters and consumers, that we should also ask between the elections that what you are doing. But we can do that. And concerning the energy, for instance, that I have said that we have now the Ukrainian war here, or the war in Ukraine here in Europe. And so I say that if you want to get an insurance for the next something similar might happen, because people are people, then don't be so dependent on these fuels. And you need it also in order to save the planet, that we need more renewable energy. It's not that it's just nice, it's your insurance for the future.
May I ask one additional question on the sustainable living piece? Because I think this is incredibly important.
It's also people are experiencing food and energy prices, incredible hikes, and it won't end there.
Yeah.
Increasingly, companies may feel the need to pass the cost of all of this transition on to the consumer in the form of a sort of green premium, like the sustainable choice will be more expensive. How do we prevent that from happening? How do we protect those who won't be able to afford that?
I think that we can accept it only if it's really so. I mean that very often you just put the label and you think that you can afford to pay it. But of course the state can always also subsidize, but not subsidize the fuel or gas or like that. I think that it would be also be more transparent data in that way, that which is really expensive and what is not. And that's why I do hope so that we can work together in order to see that everything which is nature friendly cannot be expensive. So that you don't put the label because it's green. You put a label if it's really more expensive, and then you explain it. And we can also afford a different kind of the opportunities for the people, and we have to have also the solidarity. That's why we need also the social inclusion. We need still to put the first place the hunger and also to take away the poverty, like it was in Millennium Goals, and it's still also in SDGs.
Very good, thank you. Minister, may I come to you?
Izabella, please.
Sorry, Izabella.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Izabella, may I come to you with,
of course.
with questions on how do we protect, in our journey for change, how do we protect against potential political shifts which may push us off track? How do we answer the gentleman's question about the consumers in low and middle income countries for whom some of this conversation may be, a different world? And you started out, you were the one who brought up phasing out and phasing down. Do you want to touch, you can pick whichever one of those you might like to, or perhaps
I can try to do this. I'm not sure if I'm able, but I can try to do this. I think that the first point here, you need to move from green wishing. It's not greenwashing. Greenwashing is under your responsibility. Green wishing, we need to understand what it means in short-term perspective. Everyone wants to become green, but my feeling is that to have 50 shades of green, and probably dollar green is the key ones. So we need to pay attention to this because, as I mentioned, have been discussing this in the last 35 years, or almost 40 years, and it's important that to have everyone on board today. I think that this is what green wishing means. People really worried about climate risks, etc., etc. But my feeling is that we need to understand the impact and the short-term perspective. That was, I mentioned, politics of transition. It's not only the short-term perspective, but what is happening today that will change. We postpone solution, for example, for energy mix, or the high dependence of European countries for natural gas, and you have the dependence of energy independence of the United States based on shale gas and oil gas. And when you go into the political world that you have this superpower dispute between China and the United States, for example, this is based on carbon alliance. What is this? So this is my first point. We need to understand green wishing and also how indeed, what are the pieces that we need to manage today? Or we need to see today if we're not able to manage. The second point here is how the role of the non-state actors. And this is very important to observe because it's not only to be engaged to go into the public hearing. We are responsible also. And I think that Paris Agreement, when we designed Paris Agreement, I was the head of the Brazilian delegation and also responsible to bring solutions. The role of non-state actors means co-responsibility and also how I'd like to address in short-term perspective solutions or open new tracks to play. In Brazil, as we have, I can share a good experience now. You have this pressure of the government that we have there. Everyone knows this. And our civil society have to learn to move in different ways. It's not only to participate or to be engaged. We need to promote change. And we have different initiatives in our country today coming with different players, not only the environmentalists. We have to looking for different constituencies, invite guys to come together. We are here, these ladies all together, this consultation for Amazon region. We have more than 500 companies and players, indigenous people, everyone coming together, not trying to dialogue, but to propose how we should act in short-term perspectives. It's fascinating because it's not dependent on state actors in short-term perspective. How indeed you can move into business together with consumers. It's okay? Okay. To make sure, okay, it's probably Bolsonaro, God. And I need to take care. But to make sure that we have options. It is my second point. Transition means that we need to see alternatives in short-term perspective. And my third point, people probably here, it's so important in my country also. We need to respect democracy. And don't forget it. If you want to change, we need democracy. The quality of our democracy is in check, made as climate change put else in checkmate, okay? And be aware about this, because it's very important to understand the role of the countries that can move this agenda based on democracy regime versus autocracy regime. And this will make the difference in going into the middle class or the poorest people or Asian and African countries that must be into the room. And in my opinion, we need to understand what are their ambition. It's unacceptable, in my personal opinion, that you cannot give solutions to the poorest country in the world. It's unacceptable. I'm sorry, but it's something that doesn't make sense that you can manage inequality, social inequality, if you don't recognize the passive and how responsible you are. And we need to have this global south, as I mentioned before, and the Asian and the African countries more than into the room. We need to understand what are the demands and go into the poorest country in the world, as the League of Mrs. Robson, for example, and went to Glasgow, no solution for these countries. How would you like to solve the problems based on North or based on countries like Brazil that has alternatives? No, we need to go into not only this, we need to go there. And I think this is an innovative role for multilateral system, really something that we need to be able to raise funds, not only public but private funds, have a strategic governance, innovative governance to address solutions for the poorest and vulnerable countries in the world. This is not fragmented world, I'm sorry, but it's playing into the transition process. Make sure that we are able to address solutions or to convince guys that we can see them, we can work with them, and more than this, share alternative with these communities, these societies, to make sure that it's not the old dispute. We are looking for common new ways to come together and not to bring the old disputes in the present, looking for the future, to have the same dispute of power in the world. I know that we have the polarized world today. We know about this. We cannot manage this. But we, as non-state actors, we can more than put pressure on. We can develop solutions, a bottom-up approach, and consultation for Amazon, it's really innovative initiative that it's fascinating how you can have the private banks together with indigenous people, the new generation. They're coming, they're arriving tomorrow, okay? It's so hard for me, hard task to discuss with young generation. I know the old people, but don't know the young, and I have to learn with the political process that you want to bring and to impose for us. It's right. But you cannot forget that also with indigenous people, we have contradictions. When you have indigenous people in Amazon region in Brazil, it's one reality. If you go out of Amazon region, it's another reality. Okay? And we need to understand the demands. We need to understand the languages. Okay? We need to understand the trust, how they feel comfortable, how they need to trust, use the languages, and to understand the different realities. If you're not able to see this, it's very difficult to manage transitions of politics of transitions. It's really difficult because you see your part, you're behind your backyard, and not how to come together with the different players and to understand their realities. So this is a clear example how to move from green wishing. Okay, we need to understand how we should come together. Not trying to solve problems or to act together, but to recognize ourselves, our realities, and make sure that we can be together. If we're not able to do this, forget it, because probably we have 1, 2, or 3 guys that will come together, that will emerge as leaders, but not representing the leadership that we need to change and to have robust and resilient solutions in long-term perspective, but also in short-term perspective. So my keyword, move beyond green wishing and understand the greens that we want, of course, probably beyond dollar. But let's see how we can solve this problem. Something like this, and of course we can discuss this better. And about the elephant in the room, I think that's not only an elephant, okay? You have different elephants in different rooms that must be addressed when you go into Global South. Thank you, back to you, sorry.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Kehkashan, can I come to you? What for you, in response to the question about sustainable living, what, for you looking forward, would you like to see as a description of sustainable living? How would you respond to ideas about, well, it's recycling? What else would you add to that? What would you like to see in a safe, quality, sustainable marketplace of the future?
Well, for sure. I mean, we at Green Hope Foundation are acting on that every single day to make that a reality. And for me, as the founder president of an organization that works across all 6 inhabited continents, we have seen firsthand this tremendous disparity and this ever-widening gulf between developed communities and those who are on the brink of deprivation. And it's really this chasm that is deepening rapidly because we have a few communities, a few rich entitled nations who have this apathy and this gross profligacy, and we have the apathy of their residents. So we understand that it's not just about having a policy that's going to change everything. We need to have that awakening in the consumer from a very early age, so that they grow up with the ethos of consuming with care. And that is exactly what we do at Green Hope Foundation, using education as a transformative tool to ensure and bring about behavioral change from that very early age. And we have seen all around the world that this environmental education is severely missing, not just from schools, but really everywhere else. So we are using, through our academies, using innovation and communication through art, music, dance, drama, sport, eco-fashion, writing, to bring about that change, to consume with care, and really ensure that we have actions at the ground level. So the first example that I'll give is in Canada, for instance, we partner with school boards, such as the Toronto District School Board, Canada's largest, that works. We work with them to create that new generation of learners who then create that intergenerational effort to help counter and balance the negative impacts of urbanization and economic progress on our environment. And we do this, and we replicate it and localize it all across the world, across 26 countries with over 300,000 people. And we've seen firsthand that it is possible to bring about behavioral change no matter which stakeholder you identify with. And very briefly to speak about the countries that are the most affected, and I'll be very brief.
The president has to leave in 5 minutes. So
I will take less than that.
May I come back to you, in fact? What I would love to do is ask, at the end of this meeting, I know you have to leave, and so I don't want I want to allow you to ask us or tell us what your hope would be for this week here in Stockholm. We're here, this is a group that is thinking about sustainable consumption and production, the Cinderella of the SDGs. Jorge and his team are thinking about a new strategy and putting that in place for the next 2 years. We care deeply about that. How do we move that forward? What would you like to see from this group at the end of this week, at the end of the year?
I hope so that especially the younger generation will come and be a bit hard also in such a way, say that it has taken too long time and now we do it. And be also realistic, like you said, that not say that now we do everything, but to see the path, the steps, and then the compromise, that's how we do it. And you check also how you will be contacting each other after Stockholm. Because it's very, very important, and that we are noticed that it's working, that you have an internet contact, and then you always ask at what's going now and how do you feel, and be also friendly to each other so that you learn to know each other. And you partly know already, but now, after we have stopped come and see and discuss with each other and continue your relationship. Because then they will come back Stockholm or somewhere else and say, and what the next?
Thank you. Round of applause, please. Thank you so much for joining us.
This is a democratic country. Even the flights are not waiting for, and we have to wait.
May I help you? Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And all the best for Rua.
I hope so.
Yeah, we are all
Thank you.
friends,
Thank you very
yes.
much.
My best greetings.
Okay,
The same to
thank you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We hope to know. So, go on. After 40 years, somebody comes to see you, what you have done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kehkashan, thank you so much for just briefly stopping your presentation. So in answer, we had a question here on what does sustainable living look like? Shouldn't we think less like consumers and more think about the sustainable lifestyles we can have? You're saying around the world that's a concept that people really want to espouse. How do you approach that? What are you seeing?
Well, is this working? Yeah. We're working, it's about addressing equity and environmental challenges at the same time. You know, that was something that was espoused at Stockholm 1972, but with very little action to really show for it. So we are ensuring that we can address the needs and wants of the people and communities that are most affected at the other end of the spectrum, and it's the large majority of the world, and really ensuring that it's not just about thinking about yourself or just thinking about the planet or just about the economy. It's about getting all those three together, and that is the definition of sustainable development. So really, we are working in communities all around the world. I'll cite some examples. So in India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Kiribati, Suriname, Liberia, we are empowering communities to, and the young people and women particularly, to implement local circular bioeconomies in their zones of influence to create sustainable livelihoods. So that's creating green jobs. That is ensuring women's empowerment by supporting their entrepreneurship. That is driving clean energy innovation and digital literacy for social good. And that, in turn, is restoring and regenerating their biodiversity. So in Bangladesh, our agrivoltaic solution that is, for the first time ever, being implemented in that community and the country, that is incorporating the dual use of land for agriculture and for energy. So that relieves the burden on the ecosystems, and that has created sustainable livelihoods for over 25,000 people. In Liberia, our members are restoring their mangrove ecosystem, so that acts as a natural barrier against climate change-induced sea storms. And they're doing that by tackling rampant wastage, and they're doing that by ensuring proper waste disposal and recycling. In Suriname, we have partnered with the National Youth Parliament to leverage their young people as agents of change to maintain their vast forest cover, 93% of the country. In India, we have distributed our solar cook stove installations in Western India across so many different villages. That has had the benefit of ensuring that the girls don't have to walk miles in the sun to fetch firewood. And it also means that the huts, their air is pollution-free. So that means they don't suffer from respiratory illnesses anymore, and it improves their health. And that has the benefit of ensuring that the girls are now able to go back to school. So there, they receive STEM education, they learn how to consume with care at our solar-powered computer lab, and because they're relieved of the burden of their chores. And through our tree plantation programs, it's led by them, they ensure that they're able to restore the biodiversity in their own zones of influence. So for us, we understand that sustainable consumption production, something that was mentioned earlier as well, looks different in different parts of the world. And it's not just about having one set of goals to aspire to. It is about ensuring that every single person is able to have a high standard of living and take care of the planet and have a stable economy at the same time. And we know that, there needs to be policy change. We need support of the state and multilateral institutions, but we also know that time is not on our side, and we cannot wait until that policy is implemented to consume with care. So through our actions, we are ensuring that we can bridge the gap between the grassroots needs and the policy with regard to sustainable consumption and production. We are able to transform our economies in a way that is equitable, and we are able to empower those most affected, young people and women all across the world, to become planetary stewards who consume with care. And that, I think, is absolutely critical towards creating this generation and multiple generations of people who are able to take care of people, planet, and ensure prosperity for all.
Thank you so much. It strikes me at the same time that, very few countries actually have some form of sustainable consumption plan. It would be, there is very limited investment in information to consumers to support what you're doing. I think it would be, we're spending a lot of time on this panel talking about personal responsibility and consumers, which is absolutely right. And yet I would love us to go back into that production side. Without the changes, essential changes in the production side, all of our desire for change can come up to up against a brick wall. So Rolph, I would love to come to you now. You brought up at the very start the difficulty of introducing disruptive technologies. I'd love if you could expand a little bit on where you would like to see those disruptive technologies implanting and moving faster to get this cycle going faster. I'd love it if you could also, I think anybody who sort of tries to introduce some form of disruptive technology will come up against a lot of vested interests, subsidies, a whole bunch of different things which make it hard. How do we get the cycle moving faster on that side?
Okay. I think first I will give you to a very simple example, okay? Because I like using those very visual examples because I think it helps us to really think through this. Now, in Seychelles, I implemented our renewable, I was former Minister of Environment and Energy, and I implemented an energy policy to transform the islands because we have 12 hours of sun every day. Who wouldn't think, and we were 99% dependent on fossil fuels. Today we are at 15%. Then I come to Europe. I'm the only house with solar energy in my canton, or about 15, let's say 30 houses. What message does that send me? You get what I'm trying to say? This is a region which has more, can afford more, can access to loans, because I got a loan to put solar panels on my house, and I'm not even a citizen of that country. You see what I'm trying to say? So the big disparity here is significant. I come from a developing country, and I understand the impact of my footprint. And here you go to a country, and when I was setting up because I'm talking about the reality here, when I was setting up my solar panel on my house here in Europe, the first question the guy coming to set up, he didn't realize I knew and I'd calculated all my stuff. He asked me, how much money do you want to earn from your solar panel? I said, no, I don't want to earn any money. I want to save. He looked at me as if I just, something strange I've told him. He told me everybody he's been to trying to sell solar panels, the key question they want him to show on the spreadsheet and model is how much money they can make from having solar panels on top of the house. So that's fundamental. So we've sold renewable energy as a revenue earning thing, has a planet, saving our planet and transitioning from. So the re-education that you talk about is fundamental. It has to start from the kids, but the kids will grow up in 10, 15 years. We need solutions now. So for me, education is fundamental, but the right kind of education. And I give you another example. This is the largest company in the world. You can guess who it is. I go deep. I talked to one of the vice presidents. I said, look, can your marketing be more responsible, more, instead of showing a nice river next to your material so that people are confused that this is green, can you actually go, because they're actually doing fantastic things. They are recycling their metals. They told me that the consumers, the marketing feedback they're getting is consumers are not ready to embrace recycled materials because they feel recycled materials, tell me if I'm wrong, are thought as being inferior, secondary, and of poor quality. So again, coming back to education. So when I'm buying a recycled material, am I guaranteed that this is of poor, inferior quality? Of course not, because the companies have their own thing to go through. So big companies have challenges as well, and I'm really calling on them. I have IKEA here with me today. Tell us what is your carbon footprint for the product. Put it on the products. Tell me this is what the efforts you are doing. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to get us there, but at least you're starting to tell us how much water was used in this. What is the carbon footprint of this product? What way did it come? Now you see the sustainable forest label is coming up, but that took years, right? Years and years to negotiate. I'm in the negotiating world, and it seems that we with industry, I'm not blaming industry, but it takes us years to really make real progress. But we have to move this machinery a bit faster.
And how? So what would be the thing you would change tomorrow if you could?
If I had that's not democratic at all.
Not at all, no, not at all. But what intervention, like as non-state actors, where would you ask that we push? Like the financial sector to change the incentives for business, transparency so that we can see, what's going on. What would you sort of drive as that lever to push?
The consumers and the shareholders. If I'm investing a company, I want not only to look at the bottom line, how much I'm getting on my shares, but also what is the company doing in saving our planet. This is not yet in our optic. I mean, the UN is, as a staff of the UN, we push very hard, like for example, for our pensions to be not pegged against the consumption of fossil fuel, because this is where the pension fund gets the most money, but to look at more sustainable alternatives. And they've worked hard, and I think a huge proportion now of our pension investments is in sustainable, and I think we should continue to lead the way. And I think it's possible to show that where investments, our money goes, and the return on our money is pegged to sustainability, and I think that will send a very strong signal to the industry. Thanks.
Thank you, Helena. Just to add 2 comments, if you allow me. The first one, I think that we need to understand how society became powerful today, or is powerful today than in the past. When you talk about trust, traceability, transparency, etc., we have different examples, different ways to put pressure on what's happened, for example, in UK, consider Shell company, and also how people should be allowed to understand their responsibility. Now, today you have a new saying the German police raided DWS and Deutsche Bank over greenwashing allegations, exactly based on financial products. This is a clear example of what transparency means today and how non-state actor must put pressure on. But the other side that I want to add, because I think that I don't answer very well the last question about phasing out and phasing down. When you go into this realities, because phasing out and phasing down is this. Phase down, in my opinion, has an important role because you can convince people that can solve the problem. It's not all the problems, but put in the right directions. For example, deforestation, that in the past, Brazil was responsible and also well succeed to reduce deforestation. Now deforestation is bad, this is illegal, okay? And we need to go into a new context because we have organized crime behind the scenes. We have to understand the scale of the problems. This is different. It was my time, for example. And how indeed we can have innovative strategies, for example, to go into the indigenous territory and protect the territories, like national parks, and to phasing out deforestation there in the first perspectives, and at the same time you can bring subnational players and another ones to deal with, you consider a continental country like Brazil, okay, in the Amazon region, okay, that we have 27 million people that live in Brazil and Amazon region. 8% of this population lives in cities. Okay, so the urban arrangements, everyone wants to discuss the forest, but go deep in the forest to understand the realities that are there. And why this is important? Because phasing down and phasing out allow us to understand who are the winners in the future, who will be the losers in the future, because you can understand the tensions in short-term perspectives. who will be out of the game, okay? Because low carbon world probably will not host these players. And even with disruptive technologies, my feeling is that we'll not host more coal and other fossil fuels, probably natural gas, yes, but it's very important to understand the tension that phasing out and phasing down makes clear. And the last point here, when you go into phasing out and phasing down world, Helena, we need to face something very important that I think that's not mentioned here very well, scale. Okay, it's not a small project. You know this. For business and for financial flows and also for concrete solutions, robust, long-term solutions, to have inclusion, not only social one, but political inclusion, because we need democracy, means that you need to understand scale. You need to find a way to finance scale, okay? Because to live in the past, what we need to live in the past, these actions or these projects or these perspectives, they have scale. It's the case of fossil fuels, for example. All the insurance system in the world is based on fossil fuels. Take care. So it's not as you used to discuss in the past, man. It's now, for us, the green ones, or the different shades of green that I used to say, we need to understand the demand for scale and, for example, the role of natural resource use, that we understand this very well, to shift the direction. And as an efficient use of natural resources, they're responsible for more than 50% of greenhouse emissions, also 9% of biodiversity loss, and also water stress. Come on. And also 50% of the health problems, the impact on health problems at the global level. We need to understand how to use this to dialogue between short-term and long-term perspective, and to understand phasing out and phasing down. And that's why climate change agenda, you have a tool that it's only, people used to host this only to address Article 4 Paris Agreement, its ambition. It's more than this. The NDC is important for national societies to understand not only how the governments consider climate ambitions, but what society would like to address and how it would like to join this when you go into additionalities, carbon integrality, environmental integrality, blah, 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 all the names that you use to make sure that we are constituency, that we have our tribe, okay, that we come together. It's more than this. People, Marys, Johns, Harrys, they want to know how to live in the new world, in the new century, in the new context, based on realities. And my feeling is that you're not able to make sure that sustainable consumption production is an important track to also allow scale, job generation, It's, again, we have this fragmented world. Again, we probably discuss this among us, and with good examples, but not enough to address the big challenge that we have around the world to be more fair, inclusive, and low carbon. So my feeling is that we need to bring the guys that are responsible for phasing out and phasing down for scalability, to discuss traceability, and to discuss financial flows. Back to you. I think that I provoke you. I'm not sure.
I think you might have done, yeah.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect because I think it's exactly building on both your points around why can't we just have a carbon footprint on products? Data's missing, holistic measurements are missing,
yes.
Frameworks that actually create one movement around what businesses need to capture and report on, disclosure. And that's where we're super supportive of actually having this holistic approach, because ultimately we need the data to understand how to have a science-based approach, and only then can we start to both hold ourselves and each other to account, and also to start pricing the externalities against the data.
Yes.
And then, of course, that becomes a completely different transparency around who is then claiming what. And back to the communication topic, of course, if you can't measure back to a robust science-based approach to how you can claim that something is green, again, it just becomes lots of claims. So we're super supportive, again, around how the EU Green Deal is really pushing this agenda. We are consulting with the EU Commission around, from a private sector perspective, of how we believe this needs to work, and also giving the input, because it's very complex. The global supply chains that we're trying to map in a digital passport, say, is absolutely needed and very difficult work. And again, it has to be done. But I think if all companies having to do it, ultimately it creates a level playing field. It creates a new rules of the game. And then we can start to have a whole new different level of conversation and communicating to customers. We have tried lots of different approaches to customers. We struggle with getting breakthrough, I have to say, on telling complex stories in simple ways. There is a tendency that things get oversimplified, but we keep going. And I think all these frameworks, disclosures, and reporting standards would help us to bring a robustness into that.
Perfect, thank you. We're coming to the close of our session, which should have been titled From Green Wishing to Our Adventure to Save the Planet, really. That'll be the next one. We've had a really brilliant conversation. Usually these start with production, but we've started with consumption and what it means for people, how to help them. We've looked a little bit from a sort of disruptive tech side and to some degree on the sort of subsidy and resources use on the production side. And we've talked a lot about, well, what it would take to get that cycle moving. So data and standards, which should be the foundations of any good society, but we don't have the ones we need right now, and the financing and the sort of collaboration, which I think each of you talked about from a very interesting perspective, and the role of non-state actors as voices that can keep our cycle moving. So I'm going to ask the same question, if you can answer very, very briefly as we close this. Over the next... Good Lord, we're now being joined by the aliens as well. Okay, I did actually have to moderate a session on space last week, which was another thing that, hey, we can bring that into this. For the next 4 days, so for the folks in the room here who care very much and actually see this as not the Cinderella SDG, which I know Jorge hates, but the heart of getting our economic model working for all of us and for our planet. Like, what is the marketplace of the future? What would you like to see us doing at the end of, sort of, to leave here with, to do next? Can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having that concrete plan of action in place is extremely important. We have talked and talked a lot for the last 50 years, even more than that. And even between conferences, we always try to say that, oh, we're going to have the next conference and that is when we're going to discuss this. No, there is a lot of space and time between these different conferences. And really what these big meetings should serve as is this celebration of action that has taken and then putting plans of action in place to ensure that in that time we're able to have the just transition of our economies and our societies and of our environment as well. And I would say here that education is key, and not just education of the children and young people, but education of all stakeholders. David Orr once said that all education is environmental education. And I think that is something that we desperately need when we're thinking and talking about what should we do next. We need to have that self-awareness. Once again, we need to be holding everyone accountable and ourselves accountable, and we have to stop procrastinating and then once we do that, we will be able to achieve that sustainable world. So I am here calling for implementation and ensuring that every single person out there, whether you're government, whether you're private sector or your civil society, you understand the power you have as a consumer to bring about change, to affect production, and to do your bit to create a sustainable world.
Thank you. Stop conference hopping, get stuff done. All right, Rolph.
I completely agree with her. We should stop conference hopping. Let's get action. And I just gave my example with the solar panels. I know we haven't focused on production, but I think it's important that we do. And the transformation we need to have is we need to shift from production from just primary raw materials. I think we've extracted enough materials. I mean, they're saying that in all our mobile phones, there's enough gold to pile up, 3-4 stories that we can use in future electronics. So I think we need to stop disturbing the planet. I know the mining companies won't be too happy, but I think we've exhausted that option. Clearly, it's creating serious impacts, whether it's emissions, whether it's biodiversity loss. Mining has a serious impact. And I know this is a very powerful lobby. They don't like saying mining is not good, but we need to look at how we can make use of the resources and the materials that we've been able to extract from the planet cost effectively before we can say mining is justified again. Because if we keep on saying mining is justified, then we forget that we can actually make use of the resources that we currently have. So more moving towards a life cycle approach, more towards moving a circular economy. There are big challenges there, but I think we need to start hammering at solving how we can use those secondary materials we already have been benefiting from. Thank you.
Thank you. And not currently in the plan, but that sort of connection mining to how consumers care about provenance is an interesting one. Huh? Hege.
I think we need to really address if there is any lack of hope around the fact that we can create a just and regenerative future, and that includes the circular economy dynamic of that. Ultimately, and it's been said, but it has to be about action and having a plan, having a clear roadmap. And for every company and organization to understand what is their role to get there and make it actionable in time, starting today. And ultimately, it's then about also collaborating across, like no one can do this on their own, no sector, however big, however strong. So really to identify the right partners, and particularly for big companies, what is the internal narrative? Because ultimately, they can have a really strong leadership at the top. Often there's a really strong groundswell of co-workers wanting this movement. But in big companies, it's often in the squeeze in the middle. So how do you really transform the narrative in the organizations that we work in to bring that movement along?
Thank you. Izabella.
I think that no add comments, only I agree with everything. This is a good recipe, as Tim told you, probably will save the world. But what I should probably ask, please, no announcement of Stockholm plus 100, okay? You don't need this. And don't have time to buy. It's something very concrete. But I used to be very pragmatic, and I used to be really realistic. I need to be, but please, let's be pragmatic, optimists, but don't forget to dream, because without hope, we are not in the core of the problems. And humankind, humanity, we need to believe that we can do best than we are doing today, but we did best in the past. Look, if you compare the data of the world in the past, yes, we got it. Unfortunately, some outcomes, and also with inequality that we need to face this in new perspectives. So be pragmatic, be optimistic, understand the realities, the national, the subnational realities, understand not only legality, but economic informalities. This is very important to face if you want to go into the transparency, traceability, blah, blah. But also, please, no announcement, Stockholm plus 100. I want to be back here. This is the ghost of Copenhagen, okay, the father of Hamlet. But I think that we should be back to make sure only to share good actions and outcomes. It's not to discuss more problems. We are not psychologists, we are not judges. We need to invite people to think together, to act together, to cry and be happy together. And this is, for me, really a good, multilateralism must be a place where we should come together, be together, learn how to be together. Don't go in the fragmented world, please. So it's our responsibility to come together. So my message, let's do it. Why not?
Perfect. My message to everyone here is, remember, as a consumer, one of the essential needs that United Nations has defined for you is the promotion of sustainable consumption patterns. I'm not sure that that's strong enough, frankly, but if you as a consumer remember that the United Nations defined that one of your essential needs is your access and the promotion of sustainable consumption patterns, go into every transaction with that in mind. I think that would be wonderful from my perspective. But please join me in thanking.
That I was a member of the panel that proposed Sustainable Development Goals. And I can confess that Brazil, you have to work hard to convince other countries that you should have this sustainable consumption and production as a Sustainable Development Goal. And Brazil and Indonesia, we came together with Germany. We have a partnership to face the resistance that we have around the world against this. So it's more than our responsibility. We need to understand better what it means to have a better quality of our life. If you not understand this, it's really difficult to change. But I'm convinced that we are changing. So let's move. Yeah. It's a better world. Be sure of this. Okay, and we come together with the new multilateralism momentum, and I hope with as environmental multilateralism as a building block for a better world. Let's do it. If not, we need to relax and forget the world. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Indeed. So please join me in thanking our panelists for their time, their insights, their brilliance, and thank you for attending.
some sound here, please. And let's give a round of applause to our moderator. What a great job, not only to our panel, our moderator. Thank you. So be careful with the step here. We are all here on equal footing, so thanks to our wonderful panel. We're not done. We still have first a coffee break. So you're all invited. You can go to the second floor. We're going to redo this. We're going to come then again and continue discussing on changing how we do business, changing how we inform, I believe. And the third one, if I am not changing how we live. So stick around, great discussions coming, and thank you all of you. You have started great conversation today.